Hello stitchy friends, it's Shari, and today I have a tutorial showing you how I made these cute little cards with the Chevron Coverall from Poshta Design. So this is what the die cuts, and you get this stitching guide showing you two different ways to stitch. That one on top is what I'm going to do on this first card. Here are the colors I'm using, so each one of my chevrons are going to be a different color. And this is cut from some mermaid cardstock from Lawn Fawn. You do need to cut your cardstock to the size you want because the die only cuts the holes. So I am going to show you two different ways that I stitch these chevrons. The first one I started over here on the edge, but I actually changed up my method after my first row. So I'm going to show you two different ways. And I like to stitch in the same direction for every stitch. So you can see I'm coming in on the bottom hole and I'm going back on the top hole. And instead of kind of skipping to the next top hole to lessen the amount of thread I'm using, I feel like my stitches lay nicer and straighter when I make them all exactly the same. So that is what I am going to do because that is my personal preference. Now right now I'm just holding the tail with my left hand over there, and once I get some stitches over into this next little valley over here, I'm actually going to take my needle off, thread my tail onto my needle, and tie it off over there on the side. And I'm going to thread it underneath a couple of those stitches so that it's not right on the edge. And then I'll just loop it back under and back through itself and tie it off in a little knot. Now I can put my needle back on to my floss and continue stitching this chevron as I was doing before. Now once I get all the way over to the right side, I'm going to take this last stitch, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other side. I'm going to kind of pull it over to the side to tie it off because I don't want that knot right on the edge. And there is our first row. So let's skip ahead. You can see I've stitched all the other ones, and this is actually what I did for all the other ones. I decided to start in the center because I'm already splitting my floss into 3 strands, so I have 2 pieces of floss. So I only needed enough to do from the center to the right. And you can see that I started holding everything down with little pieces of tape instead of tying knots, and that just removes some bulk. So I have taped down this end, and this is great because this is a card. So we're going to glue this to a card base. No one's ever going to see this mess that's the back of this panel. And then I can take the other half of my floss, the other 3 strands, start again in the center. I'm going to hold those 2 tails together. I'm flipping it over just because it's a little easier to stitch at the top. And you can see I'm doing the same method of stitching that I did on that first row, going the same direction for all my stitches. And once I kind of get over here to where I have a lot of stitches, I'll actually tie those 2 tails in the middle together and secure them with a piece of tape as well. And this will just hold the tails out of the way, and you want to make sure that you have your tape in those kind of solid in-between spots. Then I will finish off this chevron and secure the tail on this end the same way I did on the other side. So I am just going to get a little piece of tape, pull it over, and tack it down and trim off the excess. And now our cover is ready for a card base. Now, of course, I want to use liquid glue because I want to make sure this is nice and stuck down, and I put my liquid glue in between the chevrons. In all those kind of solid areas, we want to make sure we go across the top and across the bottom so that everything is nice and secure onto our card base. And I went with a top folding white card base because you are going to see the card base through those holes a little bit, so you want to make sure you pick a color that you don't mind seeing. And I like to use pressure from my hands to hold it down. You could put a block or something heavy on this to keep it flat while it kind of sets, but I think my hand kind of forms to the shape because it's not completely flat. We have those stitches that create a little bit of bulk, and I just think my hands are the best tool to make sure this is nice and secure. So now that my card front is nice and secure, I'm ready to add some embellishments, and on this card I'm going to do a little bee. So I have the wings cut from some pearlescent vellum, then I've cut the body from cardstock, felt, and I'm going to layer some pattern fabric over top. And I also used some pattern fabric for the stripes as well. I'm going to put a few little dots of glue onto the cardstock and layer the felt over top. And of course, this is cute, but I wanted to add that little bit extra with that pattern fabric. Again, this is just cotton fabric treated with Terreal Magic, which makes it really easy to die cut. And I'm going to start by stitching on the little black stripes. And I'm just going to do a running stitch from the right side to the left side and back again. Once I come back over to where I started, I'm actually going to tie a knot on the back. And since this is going on a card, we don't have to worry about hiding anything. This is all going to be covered up once we glue our bee to the card. Now I'm not going to trim it off. I'm going to just move right down to the next little stripe on the body of the bee and then on to the third one. And I do have some floss left here, so I'm just going to start stitching around my bee in this same color of floss. This is 3 strands of the floss, but I'm not going to make it all the way around. I am going to have to add another piece, but that's totally okay because all this is getting hidden behind our bee when we glue this to our card. So I've started another strand here. I'm just holding my 2 tails with my finger while I get some stitches in. Then I can tie those 2 tails together into a knot to secure them and trim off the long tails. So I'm just making sure I do a double knot and then I'll trim those tails off and I'll continue my running stitch around my little bee back to where I started. I started kind of down here at the bottom, and then I will go back in the other direction and fill in all those stitches. So now we have this contrasting line of stitches around our bee. And I'm just going under some of those stitches back up to my beginning tail so that I can tie the 2 together. And then of course just trim off the excess. So we need to give him some little antenna. And of course we have these cute little antenna that you can get from Poshta Design. And we're just going to attach these with a glue dot on the back of his head. So I have a really giant glue dot that's about the size of the head. And I'm actually going to cut these 2 apart so that they don't kind of try to wrap around each other like they were doing when I was just folding it. And I can just stick them right into that glue dot. And now I need to work on my wings. So of course, we don't want to leave those wings just plain. We want to add stitching, but I only have 1 layer of vellum. So the stitching is completely and totally decorative, but since these kind of have a pink iridescent hue, I decided to go with a pink floss to stitch around. And I'm using 3 strands. I'm starting in the center. I actually went around 1 wing with a running stitch to the middle, and then I turned and went back and filled in. No real reason why I didn't just keep going. I could have just kept going because in the end you end up back where you started anyway, and you can tie off with that knot in the center and then it will get hidden behind the bee's body. So the key here is to start in the middle where it's going to be hidden behind the bee. So you can see I've gone back in, I've filled in all the stitches on one side. And now I'll just do the other side as well. So once I get back to where I started up here, kind of at the top between the 2 wings, I'll just tie these 2 tails together. And this knot will be hidden on the back side of the wings, and it'll be right here in the center so that we don't see it. It will be behind the body of the bee. So just like this, and I thought I could stick this to the glue dot that was already there, but it just barely touched it, so I decided just to add another glue dot right at kind of the neck of the bee, right where my wings are going to go. And just look at this cute little bee, it's so adorable. I love the shimmer of the wings. So I did add some foam squares. You can see I made sure that they were behind the bee's body, not over in the wings. This is just to kind of pop it up a little bit off of our stitched card base. And then I can just center him up right here towards the top. So now I need a sentiment for my birthday card. And I just have a piece of pink cardstock cut in a strip. I'm stamping the sentiment happy birthday, which this card could be any sentiment you needed. You could even leave it off and add the sentiment later if you wanted. And then I'm also going to pop that up with some foam squares so that it has some dimension off our stitch background as well. So I'll just line that up right below my bee. Make sure it's nice and straight. And then to add a little shimmer and interest, I'm going to pull out some sequins. I believe this is the Hello Sunshine sequin kit. And I pulled out these kind of iridescent white sequins. I just thought that they looked really nice and did not distract from all the pretty colors of the background. And I've just sprinkled a few around. I will pick them up with my little tool here and drop them back into place with a little bit of liquid glue. And then here is my finished Happy Bee Day card. And then I wanted to show you how to use this chevron backdrop in a different way. So I've already stitched together my little ladybug. I stitched this in the same way I did the bee, so the back is cardstock. And for this one, I wanted it to look like grass, like little tufts of grass. I was trying to think of maybe a different way to make this chevron look a little different. That's not just stitching it like the stitching guide. So this is a little bit different. And each of these little tufts of grass start from one of the points. So you can see this one all kind of originates from that first little hole. Then I'm going to jump over to the next point. And at first I started here at the bottom, but that's actually not where I want to start because I want to go diagonal so that the floss that's on the back doesn't go behind those dots. So I'm doing 5 little tufts of grass on this one. You can see they're all coming from that point at the bottom. Then I'm going to go diagonal, jump over, and do the next one in the same way. So each one has 5 stitches, and they look like little grassy pieces on this background. And for this one, I am actually using all 6 strands of floss so that they are nice and fluffy. So once I get over here to the other side, this one's going to be just like the one on the other edge and just be 3 stitches. And then I will secure this with a little bit of tape, making sure that tape is between those lines of holes so that we don't see it. And I just continued this pattern all the way down this card front, creating these little grassy pieces. I think this would also be cute if you did it in colors like we did the birthday card. You could do all kinds of different things, but since I have a little ladybug to add to this one, I thought the grass look with the green would be cute. And of course, this is just another fun idea to get a totally different look with this chevron coverall. So I have completed all my little stitches. I'm going to secure this last little tail of my floss with some tape and trim it off. And now I'm ready to add this to a card base. And just like before, I want to make sure it is nice and secure with some liquid glue. I'm going between those zigzags with the glue and making sure I have glue on the top and the bottom. Then I can line this up. Again, this is a top folding white card base. So we're going to see that white through those holes, especially since we did not stitch in all the holes. I'm just making sure it's nice and flat at the top, and I'm going to use my hands to apply some pressure. Now for the sentiment on this one, I thought it would be really cute if our little ladybug was saying hi. I used some dies that I have to cut a little speech bubble in the word hi, and I'm going to back that with a piece of white so that hi stands out a little more. But I think because this is so fun and whimsical, you could easily even just hand draw a little speech bubble with your sentiment and do the same thing. I just think that that would be really cute and very handmade looking. So for this one, we're going to add our ladybug down here in the bottom corner, which I think is a fun look too. So you could center it like we did the bee or kind of have it down tucked in the corner. I'm going to add some foam squares to this one as well, just to kind of lift it up a little bit off of those tufts of grass. And in case you didn't notice, I was kind of laying it there so I could see and make sure that those 3 little squares kind of fell between all those stitches so that we weren't sticking them to any of the stitches. Then I'm adding a foam square to my little sentiment too. And of course, I finished it off with some sequins. Those bright yellow ones I think look great on this pink background. And I'm just adding those with a little bit of liquid glue. And then here is my finished card with those little grass tufts in that chevron coverall for a different idea. I hope this has inspired you to make some cards with some stitching on the background. This is a really fun background die to use, and you could use any felt stitched image on top of it. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day and happy stitching. Bye!